Appears we do have a quorum present. So the chair will ask the clerk to please make note of that. We do have the minutes of our April 18th, 2023 meeting available for inspection and review by the members in the committee packet today. So please take a moment and familiarize yourself with the draft minutes. Chair recognizes the president.
Mr. Speaker, I move the minutes of April 18, 2023, the meeting Committee of Government Finance as contained in the numbers packet be approved.
Questions on the president's motion that the draft of the April 18th, 2023 meeting minutes be approved as distributed? Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say no. You guys have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. Let's move on to our regular reports. On the agenda today is a broadband update from Secretary Carmichael. Before we invite the Secretary to the podium, we do have Mr. Bucco with us today, so if there's no objection from any of the committee members, we'll start the meeting today with our financial report. Okay, Mark, welcome.
Mark Bucco, revenue, and April numbers that everybody has April numbers before them. In April, we collected $825.9 million. First time we've gone over $800 million in a month collections. Estimate was $506.9 million. We were $319 million above estimate. Compared to last year, we were ahead by 4.4%. For the year to date, we've collected $5.427 billion. That's $1.585 billion above estimate and 14.1% ahead of last year. Still strong performance. The numbers are slowing down gradually over time, but there's a whole number of reasons why that's going on. That's more economic nature. In terms of the individual components, the sales tax in April, we collected $129.2 million. That was almost $18.8 million above estimate and 5.3% ahead of last year. Year to date, $1.398 billion, $189.6 million above estimate, 6.6% ahead of last year. Personal income tax, we collected $472.6 million in April. Of course, April is when all the annual returns are due. That was $192.8 million above estimate, 5.4% ahead of last year. April was a bit of a transition month. There was some legislation that was enacted during regular session loans to cut income tax rates, and for the most part, most of that is going to be in future months. And then there was, although we saw a little bit of that effect in April. And the other thing was there was a Senate Bill 151 that passed, which was made retroactive to 2022, which resulted in a number of pass-through entities making a return payment that they would not otherwise make in April. And then ultimately the individual owners will get credit for that return payment when they file their individual income tax, final individual income tax returns for 2022. So we had a little bit of that impact in April going on. Year to date for personal income tax, almost $278 billion, $439.5 million above estimate, 9% ahead of last year. Corporate income tax is very strong in April, almost $98 million in collections. That was $64.9 million above estimate, 9.5% ahead of last year. And for the year to date, we've now collected $330.8 million. That's $205.8 million above the official estimate, 17.8% ahead of last year. So pretty strong on the corporate income side. The severance side is beginning to show the effects of the lower prices. We're seeing significantly lower energy prices, particularly for natural gas products. Recently, natural gas is down about 70+% from a year ago in price. And that those price decreases really started in earnest around January. It takes a while for that to flow through the pipeline. We're beginning to see a little bit of that in April. We collected $35.6 million. That was still $17.5 million above estimate, but it was 35.1% below last year. Year to date, we collected $822.5 million. That's $622.5 million above estimate, 48.1% ahead of last year. I'm moving down to the State Road Fund. State Road Fund collections in April, with the federal reimbursements included, total $116.2 million. That was a little bit below estimate, $4.6 million below estimate, but 13.8% ahead of last year. In year to date, we've collected $1.42 billion. $79.9 million above estimate, and 26.2% ahead of last year. Two items of note on the road fund. One is federal reimbursements. Federal reimbursements year to date are 29.5% higher than last year. We've collected $525.9 million in federal reimbursements, and we will probably set as far as I know, a record of federal reimbursements for this year. The other thing is the legislature appropriated $150 million of general revenue to the road fund early in the fiscal year, and that's actually $150 million also reflected in those overall collections. About $294.9 million, $150 million of that is a one-time appropriation, and another $120 million is federal reimbursement enhancement. Gasoline taxes, motor fuel taxes for the year to date, we're running 1% ahead of last year and 1.8 million above estimate. Registration fees are still recovering from the pandemic. We're up 4.4% over last year. Registration fees, motor vehicle sales tax year to date, we're also up 4.4% over last year. So any questions?
Thank you, Mark. Questions for Mr. Muco from any of the members? Yep, Senator Jarvis.
What's driving the increase in federal reimbursement? I may have missed it just a second, that last piece, sorry.
I believe it's all the bond monies and the monies that we're spending on highways. A lot of those monies are matched against federal reimbursements on projects, bridges, and so forth. So the more money we have to match, the better we get back in terms of rate of return from the feds. And also, there have been some federal appropriation acts that have passed that also enhanced the availability of funds for roads that highways is trying to take advantage of. In terms of getting more specific in that, that's probably going to be a Jimmy Risky.
Others? Okay, if not, Mark, thank you very much. So at our last meeting, we requested an update on the status of broadband deployment in West Virginia. Secretary Carmichael is here today to update us. Mr. Secretary, welcome.
Thank you. I am Mitch Carmichael, Cabinet Secretary for Economic Development, which includes broadband deployment and expansion. Now, I have with me today Kelly Workman, who will go over many of the details of the program, but I wanted to just brief on a high level and then turn it over to Kelly. So, at a summary level, West Virginia has, well, let me just start by saying we stood up all these programs within, 18 months? 18 months that never existed. The legislature had never put any money into broadband in the past. You have allocated such. The federal government has provided funding streams and mechanisms, as well as local county governments. We're in RDOF, if you're familiar with the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. So we're coordinating all of those funds streams, as well as CAP2, ARC Power Grant funding, many other programs, USDA programs. All of those are coming together through our office, and we're making sure from a mapping perspective that we use all those funds to not overbuild an existing area. So you're going, in your districts and so forth, you may hear pushback from someone saying, hey, I don't like the price of my internet, or I don't like the particular speed of my internet. Our focus, as you have told us, is to go to those who do not have. And so that's the entire focus of our programs as we coordinate the rollout of these programs. A byproduct of doing that is that you will create competition in some areas. As you can imagine, think of a concentric circle, circles, and if you've got broadband in this area, and then there's an area out here that does not have it, you will traverse through the inner circle to get to the outer circle. At which point, those providers can do connections off that link. So you necessarily create competition. We aren't funding, though, those houses in that smallest concentric circle. If a provider says, we want to apply for this area, and we know that they already have broadband as defined by the FCC, we will not fund that connection. We will fund the middle mile, so to speak, link that gets to the outer circle. So just to set it at our goals and objectives, that's the goal and objective of the program, to reach those who do not have broadband. So as you can see, at this point, with ARPA funds, we have funded 24 different projects, and there's an extensive evaluation process that these projects undergo as they're awarded the funds. It's not only components that our office has structured, but the U.S. Treasury and other entities have created, criteria that we must comply with. And we do, and we make sure that we do, and then we fund the project and move forward. We also check to make sure that everything that I just said about making sure that they do not have broadband, all those components are in place. Then and only then do we fund the project, and it's evaluated by our third-party consultant, Tilson. So we've funded 24 projects that hit 38 counties, over 3,000 miles of infrastructure. I see that you, I know you can all read, and then over 38,000 targeted locations. Now, that doesn't mean that every one of those targeted locations will connect. So you can't necessarily say that there's going to be 38,000 new connections as a result of this. What we're saying is there's 38,000 passings. And the company has to comply with our criteria that if a customer orders the product, it must be available to them within 10 days, I think it is, Kelly? Yeah, so it must be available to them within 10 days. So we don't get that, somebody, a provider could say, oh yeah, I see I have an order here. I'll get to it in like, 2 months. In which case, then we know they didn't fund their infrastructure, right? And we're also going out and doing, and Kelly will talk more about that, test to make sure that, and a compliance test to make sure that they're all there. So you can see maybe on the LEED programs, the LEED, as you know, is line extensions. So if, a customer at the end of the line says, my neighbor has it, but I can't get it, the provider's telling me I can't get it, that's our program to extend those lines. We've had lots and lots of applications for that. It's oversubscribed, and we're doing another round. But it's really, really been a successful program. The Gig Ready program, we've had one that's been approved, another one in the works that will be shortly approved. And you can see just from a color scheme where these locations are, the major broadband expansion programs as well. So, and then Kelly, I'll call on you. So from ARPA highlights perspective, these are the different providers that have come into play. We have these on, I'll print it out and get them to you. President. 33 million state and local recovery funds, $70 million in capital project fund, which is very important from the perspective. We've already received our funds because we were out front on the capital projects fund. Other states haven't even received them. So that's how, we're out in front on this. We've got $44 million in private investment. In total, at this point, new connections, we've done with your funds that have been provided, about 350 connections, many more passings, but in coordination with the private sector and RDOF funds and so forth, over the last 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, about 120,000 new fiber optic connections. Now, that's not to say that some of those connections didn't already have broadband. They could have already had broadband and gotten upgraded with private sector funds. They can do with what they want with their private sector funds, right? So, but we are helping coordinate those rollouts with the individual providers. So that's a massive number, 120,000 new fiber connections. And you've already heard me reiterate these 24 projects, 3,000 miles of fiber. 3,000 miles of fiber. That stuff is not cheap to put on the poles. And which brings me to one final point before I turn it over to Kelly. Getting this stuff connecting it to the existing pole infrastructure is an impediment in the northern part of the state. It is. We are not, those people that own those poles are not being forthcoming, and we're having difficulty connecting. Our providers are. So I just throw that out, to let you know we're continuing to work on it. Public Service Commission has had a hearing, and Kelly will elaborate on it a little bit. So, again, 38,000 targeted homes have been passed. That's another massive number. So, we are very fortunate, all of us in the state, to have Kelly Workman coordinating these programs. She's done a fantastic job. You'll see, as she goes through some of the details of the program, she has, all the answers. And I'll turn it over to her after I mention this. I hope everyone has gotten one of these flyers in the mail from the federal government that tells you free internet. The FCC's new Affordable Connectivity Program, which is a great thing for the citizens of West Virginia. It provides, essentially, if you're on SNAP, Supplemental Security Income, Medicaid, federal public housing, or WIC, and there's some other income. I don't know why I received it. But, actually, now I look at it, it's home. So, but at any rate, it provides, and we need to promote this like crazy, because one of the things in West Virginia is, and all the providers will tell you, they can build the infrastructure, but a lot of times people will not connect. And we collectively, and we're going to do, really turn up a program within our office to promote this affordable connectivity program. It's a great program, particularly for the people of West Virginia. And the more connections that we have, the higher percentage of connections that we have, the more connections we will have. It'll begin to expand and expand upon itself. So with that, I'll obviously here to answer questions and so forth, but if I could turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you. Might keep that little printout. I'm going to scoot this
Oh, you need
forward just a little bit. I wanted to say also, thank you, Secretary. Members of AARP are probably receiving that postcard. So I know AARP is a partner in helping us promote that program, so thank you. So I'm going to pick up where our secretary left off and just thank you for the opportunity to talk with you this morning. I do have my Marshall green on today. I'm a graduate student in Marshall. I have a master's degree from this fine institution, so very proud to be here today. So as the secretary mentioned, we are in full swing with our ARPA funding. Currently, we have 3 projects near completion. So we have completed 3 projects in West Virginia within 12 months. So if you compare that to the pace of other federally funded infrastructure projects like your water, sewer, housing, sidewalks, roads, bridges, everything else, we feel like 12 months is a pretty good pace, and we're looking to keep that up. So we have other projects, the secretary mentioned, we have 24 projects funded to date. We're hoping that all of those go to construction in 2023, if not by early 2024. Because the clock is ticking on ARPA funding, all of the funding needs to be extended by the end of December 2026. So with that, for our 3 projects that are completed, we have field visits scheduled in the month of May. We do go out and verify that the infrastructure has been properly installed and that service is available and ready, and that it performs at the level that Treasury requires. We report to Treasury on a quarterly basis. So these are actual reported data points that we have submitted to Treasury as of March 31. So 79 miles of fiber constructed, 1,585 targeted addresses that are passed, 364 customer connections. So those customer connections are always going to lag the infrastructure. We feel that we are providing something to residents of West Virginia that they have never had before. When their friends and neighbors subscribe to this new service, that is going to continue to grow. Also, under the Infrastructure Act, as part of the Digital Equity Program, and the Secretary mentioned, we have an obligation to promote the benefits of broadband to West Virginians that have never had this availability before. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but the connections are going to continue to increase, and that is an indicator of success within these programs. So as I mentioned, additional projects are in permit stage, and they're going to move to construction stage later this year. As the Secretary mentioned, we are tracking all broadband investment, all known broadband investment in West Virginia. Some of the private investment we do not yet have access to. It trails. There is a hub that we can go into and track the RDOF connections, so we are tracking those. We're also tracking ACAM, USDA, ARC, anything else you can imagine that's out there, we're going to find it because we have all of these address data points and we are required to avoid duplication of benefit with those federal funds. As I mentioned, or the Secretary mentioned, we are in round 2 of some of the funding streams that you have approved for us. So our LEAD program, we just closed the second round of LEAD. This is kind of a snapshot of the applications that we received. So we have 10 different applicants, 40 projects covering 27 counties, 144 separate communities. The total target addresses passed are almost 20,000. Total addresses passed are about 26,000. These projects, if all funded, would incorporate about 2,700 miles of new fiber infrastructure. The total cost of these submitted projects is $172 million. Total matching funds is $59 million, and the total grant amount requested is $113 million. And for this round, we have about $30 million left to allocate. So, and I will say the quality of the applications is very, very good in this round. We've been through one round, and this second round, a lot of the kinks have been worked out through that first round, and the providers have really given us quality applications. Also, some providers that did not participate in the first round have now submitted applications in the second round. We're very happy to see that because it's going to take all of our providers working together to cover the rural areas of West Virginia. We have also just closed a second round of our MVPS program. Again, that program is oversubscribed as well. The total grant amount requested is about $48 million, and I believe we had about $30 million allocated. And then we have 7 different applicants and 8 different projects represented in that summary. Also, as we move out to the more rural areas, we are seeing our costs go up just a little bit. I think that's to be expected. Our Gig Ready 2 round, this will be the final round on Gig Ready. We have a webinar scheduled on May 10th. And all of this information is on broadband.wv.gov. So I want to talk just a moment about the internal controls that we have in place. We're always balancing speed of deployment with the controls that are there from the federal agencies and the controls that we've implemented from the state level. I think we have a good balance of keeping in mind the need to execute these projects quickly and give this infrastructure out to the residents of West Virginia, but also ensuring that the projects are executed successfully. We want to deliver successful projects to the residents of West Virginia, the federal agencies, and to demonstrate success to the legislature. The Secretary mentioned just a few factors that can delay deployment. We have at the top of the list the pole attachment issue. There is a case proceeding at the West Virginia Public Service Commission. This was actually brought by one of our project sponsors, Prodigy in Preston County, due to the delays in accessing poles in that project area. We became involved because this is one of the state's projects and we need to see it move. And this caused a significant delay. So that case is ongoing at the Public Service Commission. There is a joint stipulation settlement that has been proposed. There are 2 intervening companies in that case, and those are CityNet and MicroLogic. So that is ongoing, and I believe the joint settlement was issued in April, and the parties are going to come back together in May to continue negotiation.
The cost changes.
I don't remember the exact percentages, but they are significant due to the new policy that was implemented. It was implemented by First Energy Mon Power in January 2022. And so the applications for our ARPA programs were based upon previous history and experience with those costs. And then the policy was implemented and the cost just increased exponentially, cost and time. So those are the two factors that are really pressing on our ability to deploy broadband in West Virginia. And what we've conveyed is that, this is just the tip of the iceberg. ARPA is just getting underway. The Infrastructure Act is coming next, which will be a factor times 4, perhaps. We don't yet know the amount of funding there, but those projects are also going to be on a timeline established by the federal government. So anything that impacts our ability to move quickly is a great concern for our office. So we'll just continue to monitor that. Some of our providers have mentioned permits and locates. That involves any time that they are going to a county PSD or a municipal utility for any underground work and having to work around these water and sewer lines. So that is a factor as well. Supply chain, that seems to be leveling off a little bit, but what we've done is we have instituted a policy whereby we will allow the companies to perform advanced purchases with the proper waivers in place and proper documentation from our office. So where there is an opportunity for us to assist and expedite projects, we will do so. Matching funds is also going to be a concern for our small and regional companies going forward under the Infrastructure Act. The Infrastructure Act BEAD program requires a 25% letter of credit and also a local match. So the two factors combined there, the letter of credit along with the match, are kind of seen as a double obligation, and that may impact the small and regional companies more so than the larger companies. Access to capital is also a concern for that very reason, and so we continue to work with the West Virginia Economic Development Authority to make sure that funding is in place through the broadband loan insurance program so that the companies that need to access that funding can do so when it's needed. And that was a tremendous benefit to us in the RDOF cycle. Some of the companies that participated in RDOF could not have done so without that program, so thank you for that. We're going to look forward to so that's kind of a review of ARPA, and we'll answer any questions you have, but we want to look forward to the Infrastructure Act. Our team is working daily, like pedal to the floor on Infrastructure Act. So we have deadlines here as well. Under the BEAD program, which is Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment, the state must submit a 5-year action plan by August 12th. So we are currently developing that plan. I'll give you the high level of it, but we will know the state allocation in June. We've heard estimates anywhere between 400 million and 1 billion. We don't yet know, but those allocations are forthcoming. Under the Digital Equity Grant, we also have to do complete a plan for that, and it is due September 30. So failure to complete either one of these plans would result in West Virginia not being able to receive the Infrastructure Act funding, and that will not happen. So the Digital Equity Planning Grant speaks to the connections, the adoption. Once the infrastructure is in place, we know that West Virginia has trailed the nation in broadband adoption. But point being, they've never had access before. Most West Virginia consumers are just like other consumers. If a product does not work for them or does not meet their needs, they are not going to spend their hard-earned money to buy it. So having broadband that is affordable, reliable, and available, we believe will increase that adoption rate. We will be tracking various data points to make sure that that occurs. The Secretary mentioned that we're also working on a media campaign for digital equity to promote enrollment of that benefit. The Middle Mile Grant Program, there are a couple of applications from West Virginia with NTIA right now pending, and we anticipated that those announcements would be in March. April, and now we're into May, and they're still pending. But we're hoping for a good outcome on a couple of those applications. Once all of this is done, then the state can also compete for this digital equity competitive grant, and we'll work with our nonprofit organizations to make sure that that occurs. So I'm going to spend just a moment to talk about BEAD specifically. All of the information about BEAD is on two websites that we are now operating. So broadband.wb.gov, we share with the Broadband Enhancement Council, and Internet for All wb.wb.gov is everything related to the Infrastructure Act. So BEAD, digital equity, all of the events that are planned for the digital equity program, the plans will be posted on that Internet for All site. And we're just following the banner of the federal Internet for All, and that's why we kind of went with that phrase, which may change in the future. As part of BEAD, we're also required to develop a broadband workforce plan for the state of West Virginia. We've created the West Virginia Broadband Workforce Council. We have some of our members here today. The membership of the council includes higher education, Department of Ed, internet service providers, nonprofit organizations, regional planning and development councils, our union representation, various suppliers, that anything you can think of that would be related to the broadband industry. We'd really like to model a broadband workforce plan after what we just saw come out from tourism. So we believe that when the infrastructure projects roll out, West Virginians should be able to take advantage of those job opportunities. We've conducted focused interviews with maybe 12 or 15 companies working within the state. And our partner in developing the workforce plan includes the Marshall University Center for Business and Economic Research, along with West Virginia University, Startup West Virginia, and Data Driven. It's very important to us that this is not the Office of Broadband Plan, but it needs to be the state of West Virginia's plan, and it needs to reflect the needs of the industry and also prepare our high school students, our community college students for the opportunities to go into this field. We've already done some research that shows wages in the telecommunications industry are higher than average, and there will be job opportunities as a result of these projects in West Virginia. So we want to make sure our high school students are in tune to that. That council meets the last Monday of each month, and the workforce plan will be part of the 5-year plan. We're also coordinating with other state agencies in addition to education and higher ed, those that I mentioned, Veterans Affairs, Senior Services, Culture and History. We have a whole list, I just can't think of those right now. Then also, as part of the BEAD program, there's a BEAD Model Challenge. So NTIA has established a framework for West Virginia to conduct the challenge process. Basically, when the new national broadband map is released in June and our final allocations are known, actually it'll be version 3 of that map. The state will then conduct what we call a challenge process. So we will develop our final map, we'll release that. Companies and communities will have an opportunity to say, this address is served, or this address is not served, or this community anchor institution is missing. Our office just submitted comments to NTIA on Friday related to this BEAD process because currently states are not permitted to use speed testing in this challenge process, but we feel that that is a very important part of what we would like our challenge process to look like. So NTIA will be releasing final guidance on the challenge process. Once the challenge process starts, we will have 90 days to complete it, and it must be completed before we execute our BEAD funding cycle. We'll stop there and see if there are any questions so far.
Questions of work secretary?
I've got some.
Okay.
I can hurry.
I think we're fine, yeah.
Okay, so the Digital Equity Act. We know that West Virginia trails the nation in broadband adoption. The Digital Equity Act is designed to ensure that our residents are prepared to operate in a digital society, in an online society, that they have the tools and the knowledge they need to do so. So as of today, our team has conducted 13 listening sessions and an additional 30 are now scheduled. The events are all available on the Internet for All, www.wv.gov site. We have partnered with the state's regional planning and development councils to conduct those listening sessions. They are required under digital equity. And by the end of this, we will have had at least one meeting in each of West Virginia's 55 counties. And as of May, more than 100,000 West Virginians have enrolled in the ACP. We have worked with with Commerce Communications to develop an outreach program related to ACP, as the Secretary mentioned. We hope that will get executed in the month of May. We're really kind of in crunch time, May, June, July, and wrapping up these programs and really increasing those digital equity ACP enrollment numbers. Also want to let you know that the website for ACP has changed, ACP enrollment. It is now getinternet.gov. So I want to talk just a few moments about the Broadband Data Act and the mapping. Our office has been actively involved in this FCC mapping process. We have gone through two different iterations of challenges. Currently, this is FCC data version 2. This version shows that there are 732,000 served locations in West Virginia, 114,231 unserved, and 56,000 underserved. Back in October, our office submitted 138,000 challenges to the FCC. 14,000 of those were accepted. Our office has gone through a painstaking exercise of mapping every location in West Virginia. We're utilizing the state's E91 address data. As you'll see here, the state of West Virginia has 1,094,284 locations on our map. The FCC version 1 had 902,699. Version 2, following the challenge process, had 900,408 locations. So there's still a discrepancy in the number of locations that we show versus the number of locations that are known as broadband serviceable locations by the FCC. This may be a little bit difficult to see, but these are the reasons why the FCC rejected some of our challenges. First, the address provided for the challenge could not be validated. That was about 35,000 in our count. The challenge attempted to add another VSL to a single location parcel. That was about 26,000. So we also looked at parcel maps, and if there were two structures on the parcel, we believe that both locations would be served by broadband. So that was not accepted by the FCC. So some of the other reasons were the challenge failed following manual review, or the address provided for the challenge is a duplicate. And this is all fine. We understand that the FCC is working through this process. As you know, the Broadband Council, we wrote letter after letter, every opportunity we had to petition the FCC to improve these maps and to change to an address level mapping system. The state of West Virginia stepped forward and said this is something that needs to occur. Finally, it is occurring. It will take several iterations of this data to make sure that it matches. So it's a very intense transition, because of BEAD. And the BEAD funding is dependent upon this FCC data. What has also changed is the FCC and the federal agencies recognizing that the states have a role in making sure this data is correct. So previously it was reported by the internet service provider to the FCC, and the states really didn't have an opportunity for input. Now we do. So we think this is all a good thing, but we understand that it will take several iterations to make sure this data is correct. We're also asking the FCC to show as unserved or underserved certain technologies. So addresses that are served by certain technologies will be counted in our unserved tally, and that includes DSL. So we did submit a challenge on DSL technology and unlicensed fixed wireless. Some of those challenges were accepted, some were not. So as you'll see here, everything that the state of West Virginia submitted for these technologies, fixed wireless, cable, through our desktop review and our field reviews, those were all accepted. So we feel good about that methodology, and we are changing the methodology for the DSL challenge. So everything else we submitted, aside from DSL, was accepted at 100%. That includes unlicensed fixed wireless, which we do not recognize as served. So what are the implications of this inconsistency between the FCC data and the BEAD data? Well, for one, West Virginia won't receive as much funding as we could. So that's why we're actively engaged in this challenge process. We want to show as many locations as unserved as possible and as accurate as possible. So these are from our GIS. These implications came straight from our GIS coordinator, Jamie Hoffman, who many of you know. These are Jamie's words. The VDC data is not a list of addresses, but is a list of building footprint centroids and rooftops. This is why the state is having a difficult time reconciling this data, because FCC wants the dot on top of the house. Our E911 data may be at the gate. So it's almost impossible for us to go out and make those changes. The state addressable mapping system, that's the SAMS addresses, are not 100% classified correctly. So the data that we're able to receive from the county 911 offices that are public data sets, they're not 100% correct, and that's understandable. So CostQuest is the contractor to the FCC, and they are creating the national broadband map. So the CostQuest methodology is not clear on validating challenges. In other words, some of the challenges that were rejected, we're not exactly sure why they were rejected, but I will say that those conversations are ongoing. All of this feeds into that BEAD allocation, which is expected in June 2023. So as I mentioned, we have a couple of action items related to the ACP. We are working to get that word out and just do a better job of letting West Virginians know that they can sign up for this benefit. It's $30 a month toward their internet service or $100 toward the purchase of equipment. A quick look ahead to 2023. These are some of the things that we're working on. So we will have additional project announcements this year. Before the end of the summer. We'll also announce our recommendations for the WIN program. That is our wireless program that was funded by the legislature at $10 million. We are full steam ahead on digital equity planning and BEAD planning and the challenge process. I also mentioned the BEAD, the Infrastructure Act Workforce Council, and the Broadband Data Act. We're also preparing for the FCC Mobility Challenge, and we've purchased data sets to get ready for that. We provide all of our updates at broadband.wv.gov, and that's the end of our official presentation. So thank you so much for the opportunity to go through all of that with you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let's jump right into it, Mr. President.
Thank you. Kelly, the first one is the Workforce Broadband Council. Would it be worth having them come and address this committee to start with? And to, I see several that are set back, you mentioned that. And would that be productive for us?
I think it would be wonderful. So, we have asked Kent Sowards and Diana Long, who are with SEBR, to present to the Broadband Council on May 11th. SEBR has already published a report they're calling the West Virginia Broadband Landscape. And that is kind of a summary of their interviews with the ISPs. And then we also have baseline data for the workforce profile related to broadband in West Virginia. So I think that would be a fabulous opportunity for us to share that information with the legislature.
The letter of credit thing. Is there anything we can do as a state to help that? I know that I've been in discussions before about this. I don't know whether we follow through or not on that. That's a tool. Would that be helpful?
We have money at the Economic Development Authority for broadband loan insurance that was provided 2-3 years ago. You were very involved in that. So I think we're adequate in terms of the numbers.
The reason I bring that up is because it is part of this discussion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I thought, well, maybe we've fallen short to be quite honest with you, I can't remember everything we did.
Yeah.
Does this make funds available to anyone?
Excuse me, just one second. Yeah, I mean, so what we did before, or what you all did before was provide letter of credit for those RDOF programs, because that was a requirement of the federal government that they had to have a letter of credit, which to a small provider is cash in the bank. And most of them don't have, that kind of cash just to put in. So the WBEDA has a loan insurance program that we backstop those letters of credit that the EDA does. It appears to me that there's sufficient enough. What Kelly was talking about there, what the federal government is requiring is a 25% match from the provider on top of a letter of credit. And there's nothing you can do about that. But I think maybe there may be some additional funding necessary for the loan insurance program.
So I confused it.
There are two things. So if the state had a matching funds account available, if that's something that the state wanted to make available in some cases, those are two.
Those are two different things, the match and then the letter of credit. But we didn't say this during the presentation. All of our programs require private sector.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Understood, and they can borrow to be able to get that. That's not an issue. Because it's in their infrastructure and it has value.
well, if we could maybe submit a formal response to that question to let you know where we are exactly in terms of the loan insurance program at the EDA, because there has been some already allocated, and we just need to make sure with the expectation that there's enough.
Right, and that was where I was at.
Yeah.
That it had we exhausted.
Not yet, but let me just get that data to you exactly.
Okay. Well, I got another one for you then, Mitch. And as the middle miles being deployed out there and the fibers out there, are there 5G connections going on with that also?
We don't monitor the 5G connections. Kelly, you want to elaborate?
Well, 5G, it's fifth generation cellular technology. So it depends on fiber connections. The mobility fund challenge that I mentioned, that is coming up. And so our office has purchased data sets from Ookla related to cellular coverage in West Virginia. So it's an area that we have not yet gotten into, but it's coming. So the middle mile connectivity would be available to cellular companies that are looking to expand in West Virginia.
Yeah, without that fiber, there's no way they can. So,
Understood.
yeah, and now because you funded the fiber, those providers can come in and seek connections.
And that actually provides a revenue stream to be able to drag more fiber on out. And not to mention that you get better connectivity, for lack of a better term, down in the hollows, where you can't do it. So that's why I brought that question up, is that if there was an active way of getting these providers to be able to tie in with this, it's going to help push out further. But if there's no collaboration, so to speak, or carrot to be able to get them there, well, then you're going to go to the pace that we're going.
Yeah, we haven't worked in that area yet.
All right. 2026, are we tracking right to be able to utilize every penny of that by the end of 2026?
Yes, sir. So the second rounds are being executed right now. And so the second rounds of projects will be announced in 2023. And that gives them 2024, 2025, 2026 to be finished. And West Virginia is really leading on the execution of ARPA because we want to be ready for BEAD, for everything that's coming under the Infrastructure Act. So we feel like we're on pace to complete that. And just the participation in these programs has been really gratifying to know that our private sector partners are stepping up to the plate in these rural areas and seeking that funding.
So let's say that you get to 2025 and you've got $50 million. I don't know what the number is, but somehow or another that money didn't get utilized. Is there a plan in place for them to be able to, for them to be waiting and say, yes, we want to come in and take this money? If the answer is yes, then I'll quit asking that question.
Or oversubscribed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're oversubscribed.
yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
That answered my question.
Yeah.
On that, because I don't want to leave a penny on the table. Our taxpayers are going to be paying for this long into the future. And so you can actually get that return on investment by having fiber on the pole, the connectivity to that. I'll stop.
Okay, so Chris.
To continue with some of the ARPA, the blend of the state dollars and the ARPA dollars and your infrastructure dollars. Obviously, as the president has indicated, we're wanting to make sure, as we asked same Water Development Council, to make sure that our ARPA dollars are out front, out first, committed, and completion. Do we have any other time factors on the infrastructure money that's going to cause us some clawback? Or obviously there are no clawback problems with the dollars, surplus dollars that the state's put in. We make sure of that. But I want to make sure that we're in a rush to get the ARPA out, but are we going to be in trouble on the infrastructure? And do we need to look at the 30 or the state dollars that we have left? Do we need to make sure that we're doing the match funds wherever we need to? You know, can you give us, maybe something that you can actually produce to paper, but something to give us an update on where all those are at say July 1 of this year, at the beginning of the fiscal year, so we know exactly where you are?
All right, let me make sure I understand your question. So we report to Treasury at the end of each quarter. And we are on track. So if all of our ARPA funds are committed in 2023, we do plan to hold just a little bit back in case of some unforeseen overruns.
Right, cost overruns.
Yeah, for contingency. But it is our intent to award all of the funds, the $90 million in state local fiscal recovery funds and the $136 million in capital projects funds in 2023, except for that contingency. When we get to
Is that
early.
contingency fund state dollars or the ARPA
No,
dollars?
I'm sorry, I'm using that term, just something that we would need to hold back just a little bit in case we have overruns.
I understand, but are they, what dollars are you talking?
These are ARPA, so
Okay, sir, right, within the rules of ARPA, are you, they have that ability to hold back and not commit those dollars in 23?
yes, we do.
Okay,
Yes. So for instance, the secretary mentioned the state of Kentucky just received their allocation, Pennsylvania as well. So West Virginia already has 3 projects completed. So we feel like our pace is where we need to be. And the programs are working well. And so we don't have, at this point, we don't have concerns about being able to execute the state local fiscal recovery fund and the capital projects fund in their entirety. So ideally, all funds would be allocated by early 2024. And so we do have that remaining 3-year period to complete those projects.
and you're going to use state dollars as well as the infrastructure dollars within that time period also?
Do you mean the $10 million?
Well, the IIJA,
Oh, IIJA.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
all
so,
those dollars, that's what I'm asking is,
Okay.
is the blend of mixture of the dollars. And we all are concerned about the ARPA dollar because we don't want any callback. So now do we have any problem with the state dollars or the other federal monies in case we have penalties involved with ARPA? And that we're not making sure that we're getting those dollars out in a timely fashion. That's what I'm asking. And your report to Treasury, is it possible that we could see that report too? Because I don't know that we've gotten that.
we just put the snapshot in the last report to the committee that, reporting the 79 miles of fiber and the 364 connections, but we can expand on that. But to answer your question, so all of the ARPA funding will be committed in a timely manner. Under the Infrastructure Act for the BEAD program, we will know the state allocation in June. When we submit the 5-year plan in August, when it's approved, NTIA will release 20% of the state's funding. So that program, then we will run the challenge process and execute a funding cycle for BEAD going into 2024. I think that our ability to allocate our ARPA funds in advance of that BEAD process puts West Virginia in a very good position to ensure that we allocate all of the funds in a timely manner, that we're not giving anything back to the federal government, that everything's being utilized, and that our providers understand the programs and are ready to go.
Okay.
There will be some tweaks for BEAD, but we intend to use the same delivery methods under ARPA and BEAD with some modifications. Did you?
No, I think it's just, she's kind of alluded to it. Standing these programs up, getting the grant agreements in place with the individual providers, the contractual language, all those things was like the initial wave. Now those things are coming to fruition, and like I said, we've got 3 projects that are already completed. there'll be a tidal wave behind those because it's already approved now. It's much easier to go through the process and you'll see things starting to go. And I think Kelly will tell you, every meeting we go to, what do I ask?
When's this done? When are you gonna get done?
Yeah, it's like, we're putting them at.
I understand. It's
Yeah.
just that we were talking, obviously, we're talking about 3 or 4 different groups of money, so we
Yes,
want to make
we are.
sure that we're not going to lose out on anything. All right, thank you.
Can I just also note that our office, the Office of Broadband, is currently managing 8 different federal programs from 4 different federal agencies. So I try not to go by memory, so I have to look at each and every one of them. They're all a little bit different, but they do have one thing in common. They are all focused on the unserved areas. So thank you. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kelly or Mitch, I know you guys are focused hard on the programs that you stood up and are administering, and I shouldn't ask you about something that you don't have primary responsibility for, but I'm curious. My memory is that when the FCC RDOF program held their reverse auctions and there were successful bidders, they had timetables for deployment of what they were bid to do. And I'm just curious if you had, I'm sure you're monitoring it because you have all this non-duplication stuff you have to consider. But can you have any comment on how that's going and whether or not the providers who were the successful bidders are meeting their benchmarks, that sort of thing?
Kelly, you want to go with that? I know you.
I didn't bring my report with me. Yes. The providers have to complete 40% of that RDOF field within the first 3 years, and then 20% every year thereafter, with a 6-year build out. So we have access to the USAC hub. That's where the providers submit their deployment information. So our GIS folks took a look at that last week, and we are pulling those numbers. So we've seen that Prodigy and Frontier are now reporting in that RDOF in the USAC hub. We're also looking at the reports for ACAM, which is alternative cost allocation model, I think, and CAF2, Connect America Fund CAF2. So as those providers report to the FCC that they have now served that location, we're able to incorporate that into our data. And then when this 3rd version of the FCC map comes out, that data should be reflected in the map that we use for the BEAD program. So we are monitoring that, and it's all part of this. So this listing of programs, these are all the programs that we are currently monitoring. So we've got USDA Community Connect, USDA Reconnect, our programs, which is WBVIP, those are in blue. ACAM is in dark purple, that's in Ridgely County, right here, and here in Hardee County. And then RDOF is light purple, and that's everything else.
Wasn't it contemplated that there was going to be a second phase to that RDOF program?
Yeah.
Is that, as far as you know, still contemplated?
I don't know.
We haven't heard anything
Yeah.
about that for a while, but there is money remaining. There was money remaining after the auction.
Yeah, and those programs were all stood up prior to the ARPA fund, all that.
Great. Mr. Speaker, just one other thing, if Mitch or Kelly could get their PowerPoint to Aaron and you could shoot it out to members of the committee or something, that'd be great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question, it's kind of like a 2-part question. I think I know the answer to it first. On the federal program to provide internet to those with government assistance, is that one where if I'm on a street and it's already there, I'm added onto it, or does that contemplate spending some money to run it like 1,000 feet down the road? Or
Well, the federal programs that subsidize internet, payment of internet fees, services, are available to more than just low income people. I mean, it's, through the Affordable Connectivity Program. So that's separate than extending the service. The extending the service would fall under our LEAD program.
And that was the second part of my question. If we've got those people seeking the federally assisted internet and they're that my neighbor has it, but I can't get it, do we have a way to match those people?
Yeah, that is really what the LEAD program is all about. But I will say, and that program is very successful and it's quick because it's an extension of an existing network to get to the next group of homes or the next community. So that's why that program has been very successful. And some other states have modeled a LEAD program after our program. I will say the state of Virginia has a program that we would like to include in our BEAD, in our 5-year plan. And it's what they call legacy long drops.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it would be a program that the state could implement where you might not have enough homes to make a LEAD project, but you might have 2s and 3s that are 1,000 feet off the main connection. So we would open a master service agreement with the company operating in that neighborhood to say, these homes are unserved. We'll pay you X number of dollars to go connect those homes. And the state of Virginia already has a program like that we can model.
Now, I will say we had to condition our providers to understand that a line extension is not, from Charleston to Martinsburg. And so it is in a consolidated area because we had some that say, hey, I'll just extend my network. But that's not a line extension. That's much more. So, but the program Kelly was just talking about where we would sort of on a one-off basis extend to 2 and 3 neighborhoods, which often a provider will not submit an application for 2 or 3 extend 2 or 3 quantity extension, but this program would help. It wouldn't be very much money.
Would there be federal money available for that, or would that be a state funded?
It could be either.
Yeah.
But I will say, when we developed this 5-year plan, the plan is to say, how will the state of West Virginia ensure that every resident has access to broadband within 5 years? And so there are going to be these 1s and 2s and 3s that are still left out, even if we fund the LEAD program. You know how in West Virginia, I say the more beautiful the state, the harder it is to deploy broadband.
Yeah.
So, in Texas and Oklahoma, it's a straight shot. In West Virginia, it's not always a straight shot. So there may be a group of homes that are around the ridge, and it's going to take a lot to get to them, but we have to develop a plan to get there. So that is going to be part of our state plan. How will we address those few remaining homes? Did that answer your question? Thank you.
Dr. Summers and Senator Tar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I just want to make a comment that I'm really excited that you do field visits and you make sure you do compliance tests. The state has invested many dollars in the past on things that didn't do what they said they were going to do. So that's really important to our taxpayers, and I appreciate that. So 364 homes now have internet that didn't. Is that what you said? And it seems like to our constituents a low number. But I also understand what you're saying about it's taken all this time to set it up. But you think over the next year we will start to see that doubling perhaps?
Oh, much more than double. And what I'll say is 364 citizens have signed up for internet that is available. How many passes do we have?
It's about 1,500.
So 1,500 opportunities, but
Yeah.
only 364 took advantage.
So far, yeah.
Okay. All right. And my last question was, do we have to adjust our statute on the pole attachments?
Maybe.
Will you let us know?
Yeah.
What becomes of this PSC thing and everything? And it's First Energy we're having the issue with?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Tar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question just has to do with the total miles. So we've got 79 miles of three projects, and you've got 24 total. Between that and RDOF, I know you told us before, how many miles of fiber do we need there to get stay covered?
We, as part of our feed, our 5-year plan, once we submit that, we have to then follow that with what NTIA calls an initial proposal. And as part of this whole process, I'll tell you a little bit about a project that's going on in the background. The Appalachian Regional Commission provided funding to a nonprofit organization in West Virginia, Regional Optical Communications, ROC. ROC has a contract with Thrasher Engineering, and as part of this project, Thrasher will complete a county-by-county assessment of the entire state of West Virginia for broadband. The pole routes, so we will have, for every county in West Virginia, we will have the pole route, the cost estimate, the number of unserved, in addition to everything that we get from the FCC. We will have access to this Appalachian Regional Commission study, and the Office of Broadband, Tilson, Thrasher, ROC, we are all working together to make sure that what ROC produces feeds into our BEAD needs, and that assessment will be woven into the Office of Broadband's assessment of county by county in the state of West Virginia. So that will all be finished by the end of the year. And so to answer your question, it's in development.
And probably where you're going is like, how much is it going to cost to finish this?
Well, yeah, I mean, if I don't know if that samples, indicative of what the rest of your projects, the other 21 projects you got there. But, it's 800 miles maybe just with those, and 800 miles probably is a drop in the bucket relative to what's needed out there. And I know RDOF's more than what this program is, but, I'm sorry. So I'm just curious what need we planned for so far, that we do know we have out there in miles. And so we see if we can get a cost estimate on what it's going to take to get the rest of that done now that we're into it.
I think the best way to do that, Kelly, is what is our connections, cost per connection? And we're around 5,000, yeah, 5,000.
Let's look at LEAD. So this average grant amount per targeted address, $6,122. I think that's gone up a little bit. In the first round, I think it was 5,000 or so.
Is that all state?
That's grant amount per targeted, yeah, and then the match per targeted would be about 2,000.
So, and we know how many houses do not have broadband, and if you just extrapolate the number, it's going to go up as it gets more remote, as Kelly was saying, but how much? 7,500 connection.
So, Senator, as part of this BEAD planning exercise, we also have to set what NTIA calls a high cost threshold. And NTIA encourages us to make that number as high as possible to make sure that we can provide grant funding to reach those more remote homes. So that cost analysis is going to come together with the 5-year plan and then the subsequent initial proposal. It's all in development right now, but this data will be factored into that analysis along with the county level data that we get from Thrasher and Tilson.
How many addresses are targeted total besides just the 38,000 for these grants?
As of today, if you can do the quick math, it's about 56,000 plus 114,000, so almost
170,000.
Okay. And that number is actually down from
And
previous.
that's 100, that's locations, is that correct?
That is locations, and so if you do a multiplier of 2.4 people per household, it's a significant number of West Virginians.
And we already have served 732,000.
This is according, this is according to the FCC. So as I mentioned, our number from the E911 system is a little bit higher than what we're seeing from the FCC.
Thank you. I'm coming back again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Delegate Chris brought something up. I want to boil this question down a little bit easier. Are we exposed to any callbacks from the federal government on ARPA? I know it's siloed. We've seen in education where there was a possibility in different places. Do you know any callbacks that we have the potential to be exposed to?
Clawbacks for uncommitted funds or misuse?
Specifically ARPA.
For uncommitted funds from ARPA, no.
No, not uncommitted funds. Funds that were spent outside the guidelines for whatever reason. I think the answer is going to be no. Because the process that you got in place, we shouldn't be at risk of having any callbacks. I just want to hear it.
Right. So we understand where that's coming from, and we understand how West Virginians feel about previous federal funding utilized for broadband. And so we have done everything we can to ensure that that doesn't happen again. So the approach that we're using, which is project by project and home by home and poll by poll, will ensure that our risk is very, very low. We cannot mitigate to 0% risk, but because we are monitoring these projects as they are constructed, we collect an initial design, and then when we authorize construction, we collect a final design. So everything that you know that goes into a water or a wastewater or a housing project, those same concepts are implemented here. Then our invoices are matching that design. We're checking everything as we go. As things are being built and invoices are being just reimbursed, we're monitoring to make sure that those expenses are matching that bill so that we don't have surprises when we get to the end of a project. We want to know if something's not going right in the very early stages. So far, we haven't seen that. It's not to say it can't happen, but I think we have a process in place to catch it quickly. And then we also have qualified consultants working with us to help correct it.
Okay, maybe have me on that one. Let's go back to poll attachments in the north. And would those be telephone poles, or would they be electric poles?
They're electric poles.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody heard that.
Well, they're joint ownership, they're 5149. It's electric companies called. Yeah.
I wanted somebody to say that.
He did. He did, I asked.
So that we could move along with this on that. And so when we're talking about the factors for impact on broadband expansion, permits and locates, is the state itself, say another part of the highway, whatever it may be, is there any roadblocks in that area?
Some, I mean, I wouldn't call them roadblocks. There's, things that you have to go through to do. And some districts operate differently, but we're working all those out.
Was there anything that the legislature can do to actually take down the barriers?
I think we'll do it, honestly.
How about right of ways? I've heard stories where it's hard to get the right of ways What about that? Still got, 9 minutes.
You want to elaborate?
Well, I just want to put a pin in this. So under ARPA is not specifically subject to NEPA. So there's a checklist.
It's
from
not?
Treasury. Not. However, there's a checklist from Treasury. So we review floodplain. State SHPO says this is not subject to section 106, therefore we see no issues. If something changes, come back and let us know. Highways is generally being very quick with their clearances for permits. Looking ahead to the Infrastructure Act, the Infrastructure Act is not exempt from NEPA. So the section 106 review will apply, the full environmental review will apply. That will cause that time period to extend. And it's not always something that the state can fix. It's the other federal agencies involved. Because our state SHPO, I've seen them turn these things around in 30 days. Highways, I think, is doing a good job. The other federal agencies like U.S. Fish and Wildlife, when you have to attach to a bridge, if you have to cross a stream, that NEPA process is going to slow down the execution of deed in a way that it does not slow down ARPA right now.
And will there be any efforts made to get waivers to be able to expedite that process?
We'll look at every waiver we can.
Okay.
But with there are other considerations for climate change and Buy American. And if you know, with a lot of federal programs, I say there are strings attached, but with there are industrial cables. So it is going to be a very, very intense process. It's my understanding there's a Dig Once task force that's been created. I'm not sure that our agency is involved in that task force. However, we review the Dig Once exemption requests for DOH. So when there is an opportunity to have input on that Dig Once policy, we would like to have input.
Thank you.
Greg, I'll just elaborate what Mark was pointing out to me, that the broadband legislation passed a couple of years ago put compatible use in the statute such that if there's a utility spanning a particular area and an internet provider wants to attach or use that from a right-of-way perspective, they have a right to. So. And then you asked Kelly the question that it like teed her up to say, can we get into this stuff claw back because of it? And like she could go on for hours about that because she has put these programs together, in a way that it ensures compliance.
I have a confidence level.
Yeah.
That the answer being no, but I want to hear the word no, and not the word no. A lot of other words going on with it.
Yeah.
She said minimize the risk.
Yeah.
But we see it elsewhere. We don't want to be surprised. But the attention to detail on everything will actually reduce it or if not eliminate surprises.
You're right, and hence some of it takes a little longer to do it. But
it does, but we don't just fund it and forget it. We don't take our hand off the projects once they're funded. So.
Our thanks to you both for coming up on 4 o'clock. I'll say to the members, for everyone's benefit, we do have the regular report from Board of Treasury in everyone's packets, so that's available for all the members. So with that, is there any other business coming for today's meeting? Mr. President,
I move we adjourn.
questions on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Ayes have it, we are adjourned. Thank you all.